Hey guys, it's time for Text Takeaways. We're continuing our study on avoiding and correcting sin, and today we're going to finish out this part before we get to our text takeaways on a commandment to avoid darkness. And as we think about this, it begins in verse 7. Technically speaking, we could jump back up and talk about the first 6 verses and talking about that as well, but specific to this, we have 7 through 9 that we want to cover today. Let's start with verse 7. Brethren, I write no new commandment to you, but an old commandment which you have had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you heard from the beginning. This is a new, old commandment. It's an interesting way that this is phrased here. I write no new commandment, but an old commandment that you've had from the beginning. But then he shifts in verse 8, which we'll talk about in just a few moments, to a new commandment I write to you. Well, as we think about this new, old commandment, he's saying the life of a Christian finds expression of that Christianity in 2 forms. That is, humble obedience to the Father and in loving service to his brethren. John speaks of the law of service to man here, and that's what he's getting into. The imperative of being a true brother in Christ is having the proper love. I've said this before, this season especially, but it needs to be repeated again. Think about for just a moment, how much do we love our brethren? How does it work when we go to services on a Sunday morning? Do we have our specific group that we only ever talk to, or are we able to branch out and talk to other people? Now, don't get it wrong. I know that some of us are not going to be as inclined to want to be extroverted and talking to every single person. But if we sit at a fellowship meal, are we able to be okay for 30 minutes to an hour with people that we don't often spend time with? That's having the proper love of our brethren. It's not saying that we're always going to be comfortable and we're never going to have any type of uncomfortability there. It's simply saying that these are my brethren. I'm going to try to spend eternity with them by living a life that is going to get us there. That's the goal, right? So I need to be able to spend time with them now. And so this is the idea of having proper love. John doesn't just call it a good thing. He says it's a law of brotherly love. The old commandment is the word which you've heard from the beginning. Brotherly love is nothing new. Think about John 13:34 through 35. A new commandment that I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Watch how Jesus ends this. We don't always say this like we should, I believe, but I think it needs to be stated. By this will all know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. What is the inverse of that then? Without it, people will know that we're not Jesus' disciples. We're not his followers. There's supposed to be something different about the Church of Christ. There's supposed to be something different about our love for our brethren. And in a time when there were a group of people going around and belittling those for what they couldn't hope to know in the Gnostic mindset, John says, love each other. Be brethren. Brotherly love is an old commandment. You think about 1 John 4 and verse 21. This commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also. I can't do one without the other. 2 John 1:5, he says, now I plead with you, lady, not as though I write a new commandment to you, but that which we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. This is the importance from the beginning. It's probably talking about the beginning of their conversion, not the beginning of all time, but that from the moment they became a New Testament Christian, this was expected to happen. It's not hard to assume that that's true because I study the book of Acts and find that very thing being talked about. Acts chapter 2, 42 through 47 is the greatest explanation of what faithful living is as a New Testament Christian. It showcases not only the proper response to being a Christian daily with the community, but also the proper love. They were together, verse 44, had all things in common. Verses 45 and 46 talks about when they had a need pop up, they sold their goods and they gave what needed to be done to help their brethren out. Now, hear me carefully, please, but I do think that it's important to say this. It's not wrong for the church to have the treasury be the main function of benevolence for their members. In fact, it makes a lot of sense because all of us give on Sundays. We give of our means. Those means go and are distributed out to the budget of the church. And sometimes that budget will require a sister's light bill needs to be paid, her gas bill, her electric bill, whatever it is. It's got to be covered. And we can take that and help her with that. And in so doing, yes, you and I are responsible for being able to help provide that. However, we shouldn't ever get away from the understanding that giving is just a Sunday thing. I can give every day of the week back to the church. We find that that was happening quite a bit in the first century among the Christians. We also find it to be an interesting statement that they sold of their goods to help someone out. What happens when we know of something that might be an insurmountable amount of finances? Are we the ones championing the ability to try to raise those funds for that good brother or sister? They were in the first century. Think of the love that's being shown there. And while I don't expect any of us and require any of us to do something like that, it shows their dedication. Think about what the church would be like if we had more of that mentality today. If the brotherly love that is expected to be felt by this old commandment is carried through and pushed forward in our minds, what will the world see? What will their mentality be towards the church? Will they be able to say some of the things that are said about us without having someone rebuff that and say, I don't know that I would agree with that. I noticed that when this person in the community was on hard times, they went and they cleaned their yard, they mowed their grass, they did all these things for them. They helped them in ways that I didn't help them. I wasn't knowing that that was something that you could just go and do. I didn't think about that, and they did. They'll know we're Christians by our love. And if I don't love my brother, then how can I love the community enough? These first century Christians in Acts chapter 2, who are from the beginning of their conversion to Christ, showing a different way, they likely came from so many different backgrounds and so many different things, lost so much by becoming New Testament Christians. They gave up everything they'd ever known to do this. So they only really had each other. And when all you have is each other, you cling to those people tighter and tighter. That's the whole purpose of what John is now writing. That should still be the case, even as the church gets further away from Pentecost. We should still be as tight-knit as we were then, even today. As you and I think about this whole process, brotherly love is one of the first things taught to new Christians. But is it the first thing that's shown? You can have head knowledge, but without an example of it, it's not going to land as much. Without an illustration of it, it's not going to land. Could you imagine a congregation that has hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank or even tens of thousands of dollars in the bank? They find out there's a problem and they just say, we're not going to help. What would the church's reaction to that be? Unfortunately, that happens. There are places where they're so concerned about rainy day funds that when a massive need comes about, they're less inclined to help from time to time. What does that show to our brethren in the congregation? What does that show to the community? What does it show to the denominational world when we see them wasting money left and right, by the way that some of our brethren would look at it or some of our people would say, but it's actually the exact way God would intend for the funds to be used to help people? It should not be the case that the denominational world understands brotherly love better than the Church of Jesus Christ. And yet, unfortunately, too often, that's exactly what it is. John's trying to stave this off, and he's going to do it even further later in this book, in the next chapter. In 1 John 3, 11 and 12, he says, "This is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the wicked one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. God designed man for fatherhood, but this also made him designed for brotherhood. A child of God should love his brother. A son of God has a brother in all of God's children, or a sister. And therefore, if we're Christians, then they're our brethren, and we should love them." One of the most important reasons that John 13:34 is restated here was that Jesus displayed a kind of love that had never been seen before, a love worth and that necessitated imitation. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Now, The cross points in 4 directions to show that the love of Jesus is wide enough to include every human being, long enough to last through eternity, deep enough to reach the most guilty sinner, high enough to take us to heaven. And this new love, a love the world had never really seen before, was the work of Jesus that was accomplished on the cross. How can you not love your brother when you know that Jesus died for him? Or how can you not love your sister when you know that Jesus died for her? That's the imperative. Now let's look at verse 8. Again, a new commandment I write to you, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. The manner of life embodied by the Lord while he lived. Brotherly love, therefore, is new in depth, scope, and the sacrifice involved in it. The law of brotherly love and obedience with God are completely put together in one accord. Have we lost sight of this new commandment? In some cases, it sure seems that way. We should be working together. I know that the church is struggling at times, and I know that there are things happening, and we can get caught up in our own problems and our own strife and our own fill in the blank. I get it. But friendliness and fellowship should go hand in hand. Brotherly love should be seen each and every day that we wake up. Every place that we go should be touched by the love of Jesus. That's what he would do. And I can tell you that while I know that not every member of the church is going to be what we would consider an accurate depiction of imitating the Savior as they're expected to be, they're still my brother. I'm supposed to still love them, and I need to try to find a way to get through. What happens when I don't love them like I'm supposed to? What happens when I don't have this new depth, scope, and understand the sacrifice that was involved in making that happen? I'm not what Christ wants me to be. I'm not where he wants me to be. If I don't love my brethren, something's wrong with me, even if they are not what they should be. And you might be sitting there thinking, how could that be true? You're going to tell me that I have to love my brethren even if they've done something wrong to me? Think about it. Has anyone wronged you or wronged me worse than they wronged Christ? Has anyone come close? Yes, someone could take the lives of someone that I love. Someone could steal money from me. Someone could do all of these things. Anything can happen. But will it come close to Christ? No. And if it won't come close to what Christ experienced and what he suffered, and he still died and told the Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. If Jesus can hang on the cross, literally saying, I want them spared, why can I not get over myself and look past some of the things that would make me upset, but really not matter in the grand scheme of things? And that's ultimately the problem with the lack of brotherly love. It's not that people don't ever wrong us. It's not that we're never in a situation where we have an issue. It's that most often, if not almost always, the issue doesn't matter. You didn't eat my pie that I brought to the potluck. You didn't shake my hand. You didn't come talk to me when I was in the hospital and I said no visitors. Well, brethren, we've got to get over some of these things and trust that we still love each other even if things don't go the exact way that we think they should. This is a new commandment because of the master and authority that is used to establish this command. Think about it for just a moment. The master, by his own divine authority, announced an old commandment as a new one. John 13:34-35, but also John 15 and verse 12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And he goes on by the end of this verse by saying, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. There is darkness, sin, that marks mankind. It plagues every single person before the light is illuminated in the finished work of Jesus. And the finished work of Jesus being that of his death on the cross, where he defeated death, was able to rise from the dead after 3 days. That light can shine in our lives, but until it does, we're illuminated not. We're just in darkness, shrouded in darkness. We need to shed some light on the subject. But this darkness doesn't have to define us. It's passing away, it says here. Romans 13 and verse 12, the night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness. Let us put on the armor of light. Ephesians 5:8, you were once darkness, now you are the light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. 1 Thessalonians 5:4, you brethren are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. So shine the light. Be that preserving influence that Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:14 through 16. And also verse 13 talking about being the salt of the earth. That's the preserving influence that we're expected to have. And it's accomplished by loving our brethren properly. This is the thing that needs to be done so that we're not shrouded in darkness the way that we could be. Let's look at verse 9. He who says he is in the light and hates his brother is in darkness until now. Think about this for just a moment. It is a stark and strong, sharp rebuke here. He who says he's in the light and hates his brother is in darkness until now. Love and righteous living are inseparable. 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 2. In darkness till now. No one is allowed to imagine he can get away with a claim to be a lover of God on the ground that is in an inward attitude invisible to others. It doesn't work. I've got to showcase that love. It's supposed to be beaming forward. It's supposed to be illuminating. And he who hates his brother, do we want to abide in death? 1 John 3:14 tells me, we know that we've passed from death to life because we love the brethren. He who does not love his brother abides in death. So I certainly hope we don't want to. Friends, if we lose love, we lose everything. Everything. There's nothing left. You can do everything else right, but without that love, all is lost. So think of the three moral tests that are talked about here, or the three tests, excuse me. There's the moral test, spiritually speaking, a doctrinal test, and a love test. All of these are done among the Christian faith. These all stand together as three legs for a stool. And so don't put yourself in darkness while professing light. There's two commandments here that are talked about. Love to God and love to one's brother are like two sides of a coin. One is essential to the other. And so for just another moment, think with me about our own lives. What could I do better than I'm doing right now? What could make my life easier to look closer to the Savior than it does right now when it comes to the love of my brethren? Do I love God? I think all of us would say that we do. Then I need to show it by loving who He created. And He didn't just create you or me, He created us, all of us. We all have a responsibility to then love God in the way that He loved us. Yes, that means being willing to die for us. In 2012, a man walked into a movie theater at the premiere of The Dark Knight Returns, or Rises, I should say, and he determined to open fire on that theater in Aurora, Colorado. There was a story that came out not too long after that had happened about a particular couple who had been on a date that night at that theater in that movie. And when the gunman came in, that boyfriend shielded his girlfriend and died so that she would not be hit. Think of the love that was shown in that moment for someone that he didn't even marry. They weren't husband and wife, they were just dating. And yet he was willing to lay his life down so that she could be spared. When you and I think about a story like that, and there are numerous ones that come to mind, why should that then be missing among members of the church? And the likelihood that we're going to have to truly die for someone is not impossible, but it's also, Lord willing, going to remain to be not so high of a chance either. But do we love our brethren enough to shield them? Not just from physical bullets, but the fiery arrows of Satan that will preserve our love and our influence. What will you take away from the text today?